Hi, and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around, I've got a couple of weirdies for you. First off, I've got a superhero movie from 2015 that doesn't even have a Wikipedia page and is bad but kind of fun as well. And I've also got Matthew Vaughn's latest joint, Argylle, starring Henry Cavill, Bryce Dallas Howard, Sam Rockwell, Bryan Cranston, Catherine O'Hara, and a host of others. But I'm going to do the superhero movie first because I just watched it and it's a weird little piece of work. I'm kind of ambivalent about the fact that I enjoyed it. It's actually in German, but it's in English. And if you combine, say, a Marvel superhero movie, a trauma film by Lloyd Kaufman, and a lot of unnecessary nudity, you get a thing called the League of Superheroes, also known as ABCs of Superheroes. It's very disjointed, it's very episodic, it's weird and yet creative. And I watched it today and had a good time with it. Basically, the story starts out like this. A little girl's in a shop, her mum buys her a comic book, and in the car on the way home she reads the comic book. The comic book's called The ABCs of Superheroes, and it goes from A to Z with a list of superheroes, and then it fades into the story of those superheroes. Going from A, which stands for, he said looking up his list, Almighty Ape, all the way through to Zucchini Boy. Almighty Ape is, well, I'll give you a few of them. I'll kind of give you the high spots and tell you why I enjoyed it. By the way, shout out to Jens Holzhauer and Oliver Tejan, who were the guys who wrote and directed it. It's low budget. There's a lot of green screen on it. There's some very, very wonderfully ropey computer generated effects, mostly explosions and bloodshots. They did okay with it, and after a while it becomes the aesthetic of the film that a lot of things that maybe even didn't have to be shot on green screen are shot on green screen because low budget and a short amount of time to make the movie. So Almighty Ape, it's a guy who works in a laboratory who has to take a radioactive sample through the lab, and the lab has monkeys. The radioactive sample spills, it gets onto a monkey, the monkey disintegrates, and the human being turns into the Almighty Ape, which is basically a guy in a blue ape suit. It was this superhero universe's version of the Incredible Hulk. And there's a callback later in the movie to the Almighty Ape. And it's kind of cool. You accept the fact, yeah, this is a guy in a suit, and just roll with it. Once you get into the aesthetic of this film, you can have a good time with it. We also find out that when he passes water, it's blue, which I kind of like. You always wonder whether there's a green tint to it when the Hulk whizzes, but definitely in this one, Almighty Ape whizzes blue. There's also a nice short one with Bonar, who is basically Skeletor going up against He-Man and She-Ra. And that one's got a couple of nice twists to it. I like that. There's Cowboy Man, who basically looks like Yul Brynner in Westworld, going up against his arch enemy, Cheese Guevara. Can't mention that one because it's rude. For Jay, you've got Jesus Space Missionary, which has a black Jesus who has been exiled from Earth and has lost his way back to Earth, going up against his arch enemy King Satan, and then finding his way back to Earth eventually. Jesus Space Missionary has some superpowers. He can shoot nails from his hands, which is always good. When he's in a nightclub on an alien planet, he can also turn water into wine, so good guy to hang out with in a nightclub. There's Lightspeed Laundromat, who is a slightly portly superhero who eats your clothing and poos them out folded and cleaned. That's his entire superhero shtick. I will mention this one even though it'll gross out some people. There's Menstro Girl and the Menstro Squad. I'm not going to say anything beyond that, but they do exactly what you think they do. And going over to some that I can mention, not mentioning that one, not mentioning that one. There's VHS Man, who gets his superpowers from all of the action scenes on a VHS tape. Unicorn Man, who is very nasty. And there's a group of villains who are the main baddies in this one, apart from Nonster, who is like Alf, but only worse. And there's a group called the Worried Christian Fathers, who go up against Jesus, because it's not the Jesus that they believe in, and they try to torture him into being the Jesus they believe in. I'm not going to go any further than that because I'll get demonetized if I go too far down the rabbit hole of ABCs of Superheroes, also known as the League of Superheroes. Here's what I like about it. A few cameos. Uwe Boll, the notorious Uwe Boll, who's made a number of bad movies, turns up as the US president, and you only see him on an iPad screen, so it's obvious somebody's like Skyped or Zoomed with Uwe Boll, got him to read his lines, and then just put it into the movie. Thumbs up for that one. Fred Olen Ray turns up as one of the minor characters as well. The famous and notorious horror and exploitation film director Fred Olen Ray is in there. Lloyd Kaufman turns up and does a good job of it. He's always on point when he does these little cameos in small movies. He actually did one in Rib Spreader, the Australian movie that just got released last year by Umbrella Entertainment. It's got that Troma feel where you've got bad special effects, you've got the green screen, you've got outrageous ideas just thrown at the screen to see what actually works. And surprisingly often, some of them do. There is an incredible amount of nudity in this film.
Busty substances.
None of it's guys. Some of it is, let's just say, implant enhanced, which I'm not particularly a fan of. Once you kind of go into that, it definitely has that Troma feel. And the weird thing is that even though everybody's speaking English, you get a range of German and Eastern European accents. For instance, Cowboy Man is actually a Romanian actor and sounds like a Romanian actor. And there are all these little bits and pieces that reference other movies. Some of the prop work's pretty good. There are some interesting props that are used in the movie, and I think they spent a lot of their money on that. There are some physical gore effects, mostly with intestines and other things like ribs and other parts of human bodies, which are done quite good and probably sucked up a lot of the budget. But this is very episodic, even though some of the episodes between A and Z hark back to each other. So Jesus comes back in the end as we get down to the Ex-Panda Bears, which are kind of Kung Fu Pandas mixed with the X-Men. And some of the particular episodes have their own story arc, which is quite good as well. There's a nice thing about an old superhero called Geriatric, who goes up against the resurrected brain of Hitler, which puts together a Tetsuo the Iron Man kind of cyborg and chases him down the street. Kind of like that one. That one works. It's got a slight Iron Sky madness about it. But this movie, which I was going to just can and totally dismiss in this video, has a lot going for it if you're in the mood for that kind of gross out comedy, gross out horror, gross out science fiction, gross out superhero stuff. It's not too bad. You know, if you set your expectations to the level of the movie, you're going to have a good time with it. And I did. I didn't expect to for one tiny second, and yet I did. Maybe I was in the mood for it. Maybe I'd been watching good films for a little too long. But ABCs of Superheroes, also known as the League of Superheroes, worked for me. And it did that wonderful thing of not crossing any lines so that it could get sued by DC or Marvel. And you got to appreciate people who can do that on a low budget and still put out our product. Now, I'm not sure where you can get it. I know it was on Mubi at one stage. And I think it may be on Prime Video if you look around. But if you're in the mood for this kind of silliness, you got to go to that kind of movie, and you may well surprise yourself at how much you do enjoy it. Next up, we've got Argylle, Matthew Vaughn's latest film, which is, and this is the only spoiler I'm going to give you on this film because there are so many plot twists. I really don't want to do a spoiler, but this one I kind of like. It is in the same universe as Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman movies, which I like. And the Kingsman movies, even though there are a couple of problematic aspects to the first one, it does this wonderful thing of creating a new subgenre of spy action films that take things to 11 that is slightly tongue-in-cheek and is very much unique to Matthew Vaughn's Kingsman universe. In the first Kingsman movie, we got those wonderful exploding heads, which were done in a very cartoonish way, and yet worked, along with that one shot, which wasn't really a one shot, of Colin Firth shooting up an entire church, along with a whole bunch of people who've been mind controlled into shooting each other. Argylle combines the Kingsman kind of stuff and the Kingsman style of kinetic and enhanced action sequences. With a few older films, there's a little touch of Romancing the Stone in this one. There's a little bit of James Bond, very much tongue-in-cheek. There's a pastiche of all of the Fast and Furious movies, including the inclusion of John Cena as one of the characters, and little bits and pieces of other films, but it is something very much of its own. The story is that a writer called Ellie Conway has a very successful action spy book series called Argylle, where the secret agent Argylle is running around the world, saving the world from bad guys. He has a team including a strong guy called Wyatt, played by John Cena. And the movie starts with long action scenes of Argylle going up against a whole bunch of spies, including a woman called Lagrange, played by Dua Lipa. And those sequences play a lot like a Kingsman movie. It's like being dumped directly into a Kingsman movie. And it works. There's a dance sequence. There's a lot of action sequences that are over the top. The thing I liked about the opening sequence, even though it is over the top crazy, first off, you got Barry White in there on the soundtrack. Secondly, part of the car action involves a mini moke, and I love mini mokes. So all of that works for me. And then we cut to Ellie getting blocked. She doesn't know what comes next in the story. And so we cut from the action of the novel she's writing to Ellie sitting in her little home in the country, just trying to figure out what's going to happen next. She gets a call from her mother, and her mother wants to know what happens next and is complaining because the last book ends on a cliffhanger, and she needs to know what's happening next because she's very invested in her daughter's career for very interesting reasons. And so Ellie is travelling. She doesn't like to fly, so she's travelling in a train and is attacked by a whole bunch of spy assassins and rescued by a guy called Aiden, played by Sam Rockwell. All of this is in the trailer. And then she goes on this wild ride with a whole bunch of different people trying to kill her and capture her and possibly torture her to find out what comes next in her novel, because her novels predicted actual events that occurred in real life. And because she is in some ways a kind of Cassandra, and we get the impression that she's predicting the future, every spy agency in the world wants to know what is going to happen next. And so Aiden rescues her and tries to carry her to a man who's going to help them, played by the wonderful Samuel L. Jackson. Here's the thing about this movie. If I go further than giving you that much, it's going to mess you up for watching the movie. Here's why I think it's important that I don't. Apart from anything else, you're going to be pissed off with me if I do. There are about 5 or 6 major plot pivots in this movie. It goes from being one thing to another, to another, to another, to another, to another, and all of the plot twists make sense. The world is not what Ellie thinks it is, which is not a spoiler because it's kind of implied by the trailer. And that interesting twist is something that somebody like Matthew Vaughn, who is a master at this kind of action cinema, can pull off. Bryce Dallas Howard does a really good job of carrying the character of Ellie, the fish out of water in all of this. She just simply doesn't know what's happening. She can't cope with the fact that people are trying to kill her. She's never been on an aeroplane, and yet she suddenly has to start jetting around on private planes. And it's a real struggle for her character. And everybody else in the movie does incredibly well with it as well. Catherine O'Hara is a lot of fun playing her mother. John Cena is great as Wyatt. Henry Cavill playing Argylle, doing his tongue-in-cheek version of a James Bond with a flat-top haircut, has his tongue very much firmly in his cheek. Richard E. Grant turns up at one stage as well, which is always great because he knows this kind of movie inside out, and he's known this kind of movie inside out since he did Hudson Hawk back in 1990 or so. Sophia Boutella turned up as well. She plays somebody called the Keeper of Secrets, who is quite important to the plot, and I like the fact that her location in an Arab country is interesting because there are limitations on what you can and can't do in Arab countries. So it's a dry oasis where they are, so alcohol can't be drunk, and they kind of stick to the honesty of respecting the culture in that, which I really appreciated. I mean, locations are fantastic. There's some great locations in Greece, in Tenerife, in Spain, and in the UK, and they all look fantastic. Matthew Vaughn, because he's giving us this kind of spy movie with an enhanced reality, picks these locations wonderfully, and they are more vivid than you will get in a James Bond film, which is not to discredit James Bond films, but there's a colour saturation that Matthew Vaughn uses on these locations to just make them pop. The cinematography is fantastic, the effects are great, the movie's got 5 or 6 solid plot twists, some of which you will get, some of which you won't, and it doesn't matter because you're there for the ride, in the same way as The Beekeeper was a roller coaster ride of action. This one is, but with the added bonus of it being Matthew Vaughn's wheelhouse. He knows the stuff. He is the GOAT when it comes to this kind of spy movie action, and he does really well with it. Argylle isn't doing particularly well in the box office, possibly because it has a predominantly female protagonist, which is a shame because guys are assholes. I liked it. I enjoyed seeing it. I will watch it again. I will probably get a physical copy of it because I do like the Kingsman movies. They're not my favourite movies, but I respect them and enjoy them. And I like the kinetic camera work that Matthew Vaughn uses. But if you're not sure about it, I'd say give Argylle a go. Go in as cold as you can. Don't learn more about it than I've just blabbed to you. And I think you'll have a good time with it. And you've got to let the plot twists be what they are. It isn't a movie to be taken seriously. It's a movie to entertain you. And I really liked the way it entertained me. So give it a go. Let me know what you think if you've seen it. Go and see it and then let me know what you think. It's one of those films that didn't get a lot of respect when it came out. It didn't get a lot of oxygen, but it deserved it. So that's it. I've got those two movies for you this time around. So thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. Go and look at some of the playlists of movies I've reviewed before this. You can also support the channel by becoming a channel member or by becoming a patron at patreon.com/TerryTalksMovies. I've got the Wednesday video coming up and then the Science Fiction Saturday video again. And I will do 1950 science fiction this time, I promise. And I won't let the camera go out of focus. So until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies. Watch some spy movies, watch some superhero movies. Just have a bit of fun. Sit back, have a beverage and a snack and enjoy yourself. And I'll catch you next time.